Hello. My name is Dennis, and I have a problem. No, I'm not an anonymous alcoholic. And no, I didn't spend all my savings to buy bitcoins at the end of last year. I don't even bother that much about the fact that at this performance-oriented conference, there will be only 2 appearances of word performance in this talk. And you've heard both of them now. My problem is different. I'm a developer. As a developer, I have a lot of questions without answers in my head. What to pick? Angular or React? Vue or Polymer? Vanilla.js or Mint.js with chocolate chips? I don't know. Now, when we are talking about writing CSS and JavaScript, is it the right time to start writing HTML and JavaScript in CSS? I don't know. There are many more questions like this, but exactly these type of questions, the technical ones, won't be covered in this talk at all. Instead, I want to talk to you about us. Us as developers, us as human beings. We developers are all very different. Some like CSS, others prefer tinkering with the latest JavaScript framework, some prefer aesthetics and hence enjoy skillfully designed websites. Others prefer building unique user experiences all the way from the ground. But no matter our differences, there is one thing we all share in common. We all want to be professionally successful in whatever we are doing. Being successful, being the best, is not bad at all. That's how evolution works. Some take this wish way too serious, of course, but we are not going to talk about extreme cases today. Instead, I want us to talk about our own paths to success. Since we are all very different, we tend to pick different paths to our professional success. But on these different paths, we tend to meet obstacles that are common to anybody. And exactly about these obstacles I would like to talk to you about today. We will try to see what those are, we will try to analyze those, and hopefully we will try to figure out how to deal with those. And before we begin, I would like us to train our imagination. Some of the modern physicists truly believe that the universe around us is nothing more than just the computer simulation. So all of us are just computer programs living in a huge computer program. Let's assume this is true for a second. So let's take a look at how an average developer could look like in the form of JavaScript program. So it all starts here. We are born and raised. And at some point, we get to our first milestone as developers. We read our first book. In my case, it was first edition of Designing with Web Standards by Jeffrey Zeldman. Yes, I'm that old. You read the book, you get the impression that you want to go on, and you probably dive into your first project, probably for yourself or for a friend. Probably it was rubbish, and probably you didn't get paid. But you really enjoyed the feeling that you can create something once and make it instantly available to millions of users around the world. So you want to go on, and you get to your first work as the developer. And things go on and on and on, and everything seems to be fine, except at some point something goes wrong. Take a look at the console. Our program starts throwing errors. And as developers, we know that once our program starts throwing errors, we have to stop, debug those, and fix. So let's take a look at what are the problems in the program defining us as developers. There are only 3 here for now, but this is just because of time constraints. We could go on and on and on with this list. So these 3 are the ones we are going to talk about today. And we start with the first one, perfectionism. Now I will show you some pictures. I'm not going to say a word. I'm just interested in your reaction. I will let this one stay. So, of course, this is by far not scientific research, right? But your reaction tells me that apparently some of you consider yourselves to be perfectionists. I used to consider myself a perfectionist as well. But whether we want it or not, perfectionists are a completely different breed when it comes to work. Non-perfectionists, or let's call them normal people, Normal people consider work to be just that, work. Perfectionists consider work to be a way to challenge ourselves. There is no other way for perfectionists other than make a project perfect. Criticism is the worst enemy of a perfectionist. So we do anything we can in order to avoid even the slightest hint to criticism. And when the work is done according to how a perfectionist intended it to be, this work can truly shine. So why exactly did I put perfectionism as the bug in our system? Don't get me wrong, perfectionism is really good, but nowadays psychologists differ two types of perfectionism. Positive perfectionism, or healthy perfectionism, and negative perfectionism, unhealthy. Positive perfectionism is the moving force for a lot of industries because it allows you to achieve outstanding results in anything you have passion for. It's wonderful when your dentist, for example, is a perfectionist, or an architect that built your house, or it's great that Steve Jobs was such a perfectionist that even now all the world of the portable devices is compared to what his company achieved many years ago. But there is a pattern here. Perfectionism is always good when you are a consumer. When we create things, perfectionism can really stand in our way. Let's talk about Steve Jobs as a classical example of perfectionism. He was a very hard person to work with. In 1972, if I don't confuse it, he was working on his new Apple II computer. And he had to pick the color for the casing for that computer, the beige color. Okay. Pantone company that was working with Apple back then sent him the whole palette of beige colors that they had, 2,000 shades. Not 2, not 20, not 200. 2,000 shades. None were good enough for Steve Jobs. He desperately wanted to develop his own perfect beige color for his perfect computer. He was so obsessed with this idea that Michael Scott, the CEO of Apple back then, had to interfere and stop Jobs from doing this, otherwise the computer would have never been released. Negative perfectionists can get really aggressive when somebody challenges the way they work or their ideas. As an example, let's take a look at the short clip from a very well-known sitcom, Silicon Valley, that nicely illustrates the problem.
Richard, what's wrong?
Nothing. Nothing. Literally, it's all good. Come on.
Oh my God.
I'm sorry.
Your roommates are right. You really hate spaces.
No. I don't. It's not hate. Hate's a strong word. Truth be told, I do have a slight preference for tabs, but that's only because I'm anal and because I prefer precision.
Well, not to pick a fight here, but if you really care about precision, wouldn't you use spaces? But whatever. Once it goes through the compiler, it's the same thing, right?
Yeah, technically, yes. I guess I just don't understand why anyone would use spaces over tabs. Like, if it's all the same, well, why not just use tabs?
Because it could look different on other people's computers.
Tabs create smaller file sizes, all right? I run a compression company. Trust me, I've devoted my life to minimalizing file sizes. It's what I do. I mean, I do not get why anyone would use spaces over tabs. I mean, why not just use Vim over Emacs?
I do use Vim over Emacs.
Oh, God help us.
So I think you've got the idea. So negative perfectionism brings a lot of troubles to our personal life and our work. But when it comes to work, there are some typical problems that we face with the negative perfectionism. So the first problem that negative perfectionism brings is called perfectionist paralysis. We all are familiar with procrastination. But different people procrastinate due to different reasons. Some are just tired, some want to do something easy on the brain. Perfectionists procrastinate for another reason. We are waiting for an ideal moment to start working on our ideal project. Well, at least that's how perfectionists perceive this process. In reality, perfectionists are just afraid to not achieve perfect result at the end. This is plain fear of failure. It's natural that it's hard to find enough strength to fight these fears, so this ideal moment never comes to perfectionists. But again, let's train our imagination and imagine that this moment came, or simply a deadline is knocking at your door and you have to start working. And then another problem of negative perfectionism gets into play. That is called picking a detail. Since perfectionists want to finish every task they're working with necessarily with the perfect result, they tend to pick very small tasks that are guaranteed to finish with this perfect result. Doing this, they get so deep in this small task that they completely lose overview of the project still happening around this small task. So they are completely isolated from the rest of the project. But again, let's assume miracles happen and you have such a brilliant project manager who is familiar with your style of work and reminds you about delivering the result from time to time. So at some point you're ready, you're done with your task. And here comes the next problem with negative perfectionism. That is called unnecessary task, or as I call it, a cherry on top. The moment you're ready to deliver your task, your application, your project, whatever, an evil idea comes to your mind. This might be improved a bit. And you start with just taking a look, right? And then another evil idea comes to your mind. Shouldn't be complex, shouldn't take more than 10, 15 minutes. And you dive deeper, and deeper, and deeper, and at the end, you spend the whole day working on something that at best doesn't bring value to your project. At worst, you run git reset hard because this feature you were working with just works unreliable or breaks the whole project. So we see that negative perfectionism and its features bring a lot of troubles into our lives, lives of those who we work with, and those who dare to live with us. So we have to do something about this. A lot of resources advocate for as simple solution as stop being a perfectionist. Well, this is much easier to say than to do. Perfectionism is wired in the brains of perfectionists. And it's the same as telling to normal people, just you should stop breathing, or you should stop seeing. This doesn't work this way. So instead of telling you that we should stop being perfectionists, I advocate for another thing. We have to turn this obsession-driven negative perfectionism into positive perfectionism. It's fine to be perfectionists. So let me, as an example of how to convert this, let me tell you a story. By the age of 40, before establishing one of the most valuable and respected car companies in the world, Henry Ford had established 2 other car companies and failed with both of those. Moreover, the management of the second company that he established had to fire him just 2 months after he established this company. This company is now known as Cadillac. Not a lot of people know that Cadillac has been established by Henry Ford as well. But according to the management of Cadillac, Ford was constantly working on perfecting the design of the car, completely delaying and ignoring any deadlines, postponing the production of the real car. So they had to fire him. But no matter his craving for perfectionism, the first cars of his third company, that is now known as Ford Motor Company, were just on par with the competitors. Neither better nor worse. They were just average cars. Because of this, Ford insisted on postponing production of these cars before they get perfected. At this moment, management of his third company had enough of Henry Ford, but instead of firing him, they insisted on implementing the paradigm, make sale now, fix them later. Had it been not to the healthy attitude to perfectionism from the management of Ford Motor Company, the world might have never heard of Henry Ford. He would just push his third company off the bridge as he did twice before. In order to give you a better perspective on differences between positive and negative perfectionism in our industry, let's consider 2 statements. The first one, my product should be perfect. I'm not going to release, develop a feature, commit before I'm sure it is perfect. And the second one, my product should be perfect. And this release, feature, commit moves me one step closer to this perfect result. With this example, it's easy to see the difference between positive and negative and see how the negative perfectionism, unhealthy perfectionism, blocks us when we create things. It can really block everything. So in order to convert to this positive attitude, we have to accept that our products can live in any version. Alpha, beta, gamma, 0.1, they should not be perfect. They can be incomplete from day one. That's totally fine because perfection just doesn't exist. Stephen Hawking once said, one of the basic rules of the universe is that nothing is perfect. Perfection simply doesn't exist. And I bet that if Stephen Hawking didn't find perfection in the universe, none of us will. Because if we insist on being negative perfectionists, it moves us to get all the information in our industry just to understand what is perfect, what is not. And then we tend to fall into the next bug of our system. That is called imposter phenomenon. I bet a lot of you are asking yourselves now, what phenomenon again? Like, what's that thing? And that's true. This topic hasn't been spoken about until recently in our industry. But scientific research shows that 2 out of 5 successful people constantly suffer from imposter phenomenon. And up to 70% of the general population experienced it at least once during their career. Before we proceed, I would like to give you 3 statements. I don't want you to raise your hands now, but I want you to internally reflect whether one of these statements is applicable to you. So, the first statement, you think that your success in something is due to luck, timing, or any other third party rather than your hard work or your talent. You think that others might discover that you are not as skilled as they think you are. You think that others are more intelligent than you are. Now, those who can say that at least one of these statements is applicable to them, could I please ask you to raise your hands? Welcome. Welcome to the club of the imposters. And I would like to congratulate all of you because we are in a really good company. You think, why would anyone want to see me again in a movie? And I don't know how to act anyway, so why am I doing this? Meryl Streep, actress, 389 nominations, 156 wins, 3 Oscars as Best Actress. I always feel myself like something of an imposter. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not a writer. I've been fooling myself and other people. John Steinbeck, a writer. 27 books, Pulitzer Prize for fiction, Nobel Prize in literature. I still doubt myself every single day. What people believe is my self-confidence is actually my reaction to fear. Will Smith, actor, musician, 6 American Music Awards, 4 Grammys, 2 Oscar nominations as Best Actor. So technically, what imposter phenomenon really does, it gives you the feeling of being a fraud despite all evidence to the contrary. It's the inability to internalize your own achievements that leads you to feel less competent than the rest of the world believes you to be. When I first heard about imposter phenomenon, I had my eureka moment because I didn't even realize that the feelings I have constantly had a name. But this name was really well established by then. Imposter phenomenon, imposter syndrome, imposterism, these are all the same. First, this term has been coined in a scientific paper from 1978 dedicated to high-achieving women in academics. That's true. For many years, scientific community believed that this is the problem. This problem is highly confined to high-achieving women. But the very same scientific community now believes that this problem might be even bigger for man. Because naturally enough, for man, it's harder to confess in feelings like insecurity or incompetence. Hence, men end up hiding their feelings, being unable to unburden themselves and seek help. What happens if we are unaware of this imposter phenomenon or simply ignore it? So from a simple psychological discomfort of insecurity, it leads us straight to failure. I'm sure that everybody here is familiar with the situation when you're getting information from different sources in our industry and you try to stay on top of on the cutting edge of the technology and know everything that is going on in our industry. Just a couple of years ago, I had several applications in my portable devices that were bringing me information and new articles and new tutorials from the world of development, so that I was constantly getting these updates. And I had to read all of them. But naturally enough, at some point I realized that I do not consume all of that information. On the best days, I would just glance through the titles of like new tutorials or news, pick a couple of them, and they would stay opened and usually untouched in my browser for days. Why did it end up like this? Why didn't I feel myself more competent after consuming all this information? simply because it was not me who was interested in this information. It was my imposter syndrome that was pushing me to consume this information so that I wouldn't feel myself an incompetent fraud. So instead of making us more competent and get information about the things that we can apply in our work right now, right here, what imposter syndrome does is actually pushing us to the state of frustration. But to those who have experienced this feeling or experience it permanently, I have good news. The irony of imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon is that true frauds and true idiots seem to rarely experience it. As simple as that. British philosopher, economist Bertrand Russell puts it in a more poetic way. He says, "The trouble with the world is that the stupid are cocksure and the intelligent are full of doubt." So it turns out that imposter syndrome is not really that bad thing. The Pacific Standard magazine goes even further. They say imposterism is for many people a natural symptom of gaining expertise. And this makes total sense. When we gain expertise, we extend the perimeter of what we know, but at the same time we expose ourselves to even more of what we don't. So imposter syndrome is definitely not a negative thing. And there is no point in fighting it. Instead, we have to change our attitude to imposter syndrome. And the first thing on this way is to embrace imposterism. Next time you feel like you're lagging behind, you do not understand what your colleagues are talking about, you're lagging behind the industry, do not rush to get all the information you can find. Instead, just stop. Stop, relax, and enjoy. Because most probably this is the sign of you gaining expertise and gaining wisdom to accept that there is much more in this world for us to accept, including our industry. But I deliberately say that most probably this is the case because some confuse stupid bravery to expertise, but this is a completely different story. The second step on the way of changing our attitude to imposterism is measure yourself with your own yardstick. In our industry, it's very easy to constantly self-criticize because people around you always brag about their achievements, about what they have done, great projects. But competing to others is the game impossible to win. Instead, try to compete with yourself. Where were you a year ago, 6 months ago? Do you see the difference? Can you track the progress in your work? If you start competing with yourself, it will give you much better information and much better basis for you to internalize your own achievements. And the third step on changing our attitude to imposterism is actually communicating your fears. It's very easy to forget that every person, even when he or she is put into a social group, they still keep thinking about their own feelings. So if you are thinking that everybody around you are smarter and you feel discomfortable about this, just think about that everybody around you might think exactly the same, that he's not the smartest in this group. Neil Gaiman, award-winning author of small books, novels, comics, movies, has a perfect antidote to soothe anybody with imposter syndrome. Once he was invited to a gathering of people who create interesting things like writers, artists, movie producers, and so on and so on. And he didn't feel himself very comfortable in this gathering of people because he didn't feel that he belongs to this gathering. And they kept inviting him for several times. And one day, he was standing in the corner, chatting with another person standing next to him about different things, including their shared first name, Neil. And that second Neil said, "I'm looking at all these people who really create things, and I think, what the heck do I do here? Among all these people who create things, I was just sent to where I had to go." And Neil Gaiman answered, "Well, yes, but you were the first man on the moon. I think that counts for something." And Neil Gaiman had a real relief, because if Neil Armstrong felt like an imposter, probably everyone did. So next time you feel like you're being you're on the edge of being uncovered by your colleagues that you do not know as much as they think you do, just tap yourself into the knowledge that everyone around you might feel inadequate, even your boss. Because if we do not change our attitude to imposterism, we tend to get to the problems of the next bug of our system. That is called long hours. So now let me just ask you one question. How many of you put long hours, like working up to midnight, but then the day after realize that everything that has been written after midnight has to be changed because it's unreliable or broken or completely breaks the whole project? How many of you have been in this situation? Wonderful. So this is really great because, you know, long hours is nothing new in our industry, right? But I have never heard of people on the deathbed claiming something, oh God, why have I been working so little? Contrary to this, palliative nurses working with end-to-life care state that one of the most mentioned regrets people express on their deathbeds is that they have been working too much. Nevertheless, long hours are inevitable in our industry. Sometimes we have to put them, and because there are things like deadlines, and we all know how good we are with time estimations, right? But the thing is that long hours are not bug per se. There are, again, as with perfectionists, there are two types of long hours. There are temporary long hours. This is the category of long hours that can occur, for example, when a new version of your favorite JavaScript framework is being released, and you are willing to find out how to apply it to your project right now. You are excited. You want to put these long hours. This category of long hours is typical to somebody we would call hard-working person. But there is another type of long hours that is much more permanent and much more dangerous. Perfectionism and imposter syndrome, when they are not treated well, when they become the problem, land us straight into this category of the long hours. And this long category is typical to somebody we would call a workaholic. Now, I know that it's really hard to see the difference between hardworking person and workaholic. But I like how the psychotherapist Brian Robinson puts this into comparison. So he says, hardworking people usually have some balance in their lives. They can sit at their desks in the office and think about skiing, while workaholics are on the ski slopes thinking about work. Oh, don't try that. Why do we do this? Because most of the times we want to be productive. We want to do more and achieve more. In 1920s, American company, Ford Motor Company, again Ford Motor Company, conducted research, including their own employees, and figured out that indeed, just 20 hours on top of average 40 hours a week, indeed increases the productivity. 60-hour week gives you more, indeed, but it takes only 3 to 4 weeks before productivity actually turns negative. The same research has been repeated for many times after that, and the results were consistent. 3 to 4 weeks of increased productivity, and then the productivity actually goes negative. So we see that even though we are busy during these long hours, it doesn't mean that we are productive during these long hours. Why? Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to our common friend, brain. Brain, in a lot of cases, behaves just like a muscle. Even though it's not a muscle, it behaves like one in some cases. And when we put long hours, our brain gets tired, as any other muscle. This leads us to the situation when it all starts with long hours. We want to achieve more. We want to be more productive, right? Our brain gets tired, and we are prone to making errors. We do make errors in our code. In the world where we crave, we want to deliver perfect result, this means that errors in our code do not allow us to feel satisfied. We lack the feeling of accomplishment. In order to regain this feeling of accomplishment, what we do? We put long hours again. So we are stuck in this mental recursion that, after all, leads us to the state known as stress. But stress and its heavier forms like burnout are not only about productivity. KAROSHI. This literally means death by overwork in Japanese. According to different resources, in 2015, 10,000 people in Japan died solely due to overwork. But even so, this term stands nowhere near another term, goulaosi, that technically means the same, death by overwork, but in Chinese. Every year, China loses about 600,000 people due to overwork. That results in 1,600 deaths every single day. We are not talking about people working with sharp objects or guns. Majority of these people are white collars sitting in the offices. In order to understand why stress is so dangerous to us, we have to get a bit deeper into our brain. When brain detects that we are stressed, it sends signals all over our body to enable the protective mechanism. And among other things, this protective mechanism consists of two hormones, adrenaline and the so-called stress hormone, cortisol. This couple, adrenaline and cortisol, is technically the same as putting important into your CSS. It overrides everything else. At this moment, for your body, it becomes very unimportant to digest your lunch or to solve the problem you're working with at the moment. The most important thing for your body becomes how to survive the next 10 minutes. This mechanism is inevitable. It helps you make fast decisions when you're in real trouble. But when the same very mechanism is applied to our bodies for prolonged periods of time, in particular due to long hours, it can severely damage our brain. Recent studies in California and Sweden show that prolonged periods of stress change our brain on the physical level. They claim that amygdala region is increased, thinning of prefrontal cortex happens, and shrinking of hippocampus takes place. And the only question we might have here, what the heck does this mean? In order to translate this into human-readable language, it means premature aging of our brain, significant drop in learning abilities, weakened memory. And to make it even more clear, all of these three in common, in a group, are the early signs of mental disability. Isn't it brilliant? We try to achieve perfect result. We try to consume all the information we have in our industry. We put long hours in order to be productive. We want to do our best. But the paycheck is early Alzheimer's or dementia. We clearly have to do something about this. You can find a lot of solutions to how to fight stress. As simple things as chocolate or sun or massage or physical exercises can produce positive hormones in your bodies that fight the stress, fight this couple of cortisol and adrenaline. But instead of talking about these popular methods, I would like to talk to you about a different approach today. Let's talk about Harvard University. So probably all of you know what Harvard University is. It's one of the most selective universities in the world. It has 133 Nobel laureates came out from Harvard, 35 current billionaires, 8 presidents of the United States. It's the place where Microsoft and Facebook were born. Everybody who studies at Harvard has to dedicate his or her, every minute of his or her life to either studying or self-development. This is a crazy place to be. A lot of students who are studying there really do live this crazy life. In 2004, students had a meeting with the management of the university, raising some complaints or some concerns that they had. Quite weird concerns, I must say. Some of the students asked for permission to take 2 full-size 4-year courses and pass them simultaneously. So two full-size courses at the same time. Others wanted to take full-size 4-year course and pass it during 3 years. So all the concerns were related to the fact that students wanted to achieve as much as possible while they are at Harvard. But instead of being impressed, the management of Harvard University decided a bit differently. Harry Lewis, who was the dean of undergraduate school at undergraduate college at Harvard back then, sent a letter to all the students entitled "Slow Down, Getting More Out of Harvard, but by Doing Less." In this letter, Harry Lewis appealed to students and said that instead of increased mental pressure, what they really need is to slow down in order to get as much as possible from Harvard. Moreover, he advocated for students taking some time off Harvard, and not just an evening or a week. He suggested students taking the whole semester or the whole year off Harvard. Naturally enough, parents of the students were a bit confused, believing that students won't be willing to come back to Harvard or will forget everything that they have studied before leaving Harvard. But as statistics shows, 96% of those who took the whole year of Harvard, 96% came back, gained readmission, and successfully graduated Harvard. Harvard calls this slow learning. Drew Faust, current president of the Harvard University, says, college can help you learn how to think more than what to think. And now I think this is exactly what our industry is needing. We have a lot of information telling us what to think, even if it's titled how to. But we have to learn ourselves how to think. But for this, we need what Harry Lewis in his Slow Down letter called enough breathing room. But our craving for perfectionism, our constant feeling of insecurity, and as a result, our permanent long hours completely eat all this breathing room. Today, we saw that our system defining us as developers have plenty of bugs. We covered just the tip of the iceberg. There are many, many more. But unlike our products and our projects, we cannot postpone fixing this. Because unlike our products, our lives can be only in version 1.0. And we have to fix our problems right in the production. Does our industry need more professional, successful developers? Frankly, I don't know. But what is certain is that our industry needs more healthy, more happy developers. My name is Dennis. I'm a developer, and because of this, I have a lot of problems. I still want my projects to be perfect. I still feel myself like a fraud from time to time, and of course, I have to put long hours sometimes. But as psychiatrists say, acknowledging a problem is the first step to mental health. Today I shared some of the problems that I personally have, but I'm sure some of those resonated with you. Because even though we are all very different, it doesn't mean we cannot have the same problems. Debug yourself often, fix your problems, and push straight into production. Stay healthy, stay happy. Thank you.